Okay, good afternoon and welcome to Iyun, Shulchan Aruch, Yomi. Today's Simmons is Orach Chaim 10 Zion 16. There's only one halacha today. The halacha is how big your sitz has to be in order that you have to put it, your beged has to be, the garment has to be, in order to be chayav to put tzitzis on it. Shulchan Aruch says very clearly it has to be something that is big enough to cover most of the body, including the head of a katan, a minor. Um, the Mefarshim say is about a 9-year-old katan. And the Ramah adds, it also has to be something, not only the katan wear cover most of his body, but a gadol would use the same beged to go arai, yotze ba'arai. And they say, Rashi said, shuk, you go to the shuk, you go sometimes to the marketplace in this beged. Um, According to the Shulchan Aruch, the ikr is just the first part. Even if people really wouldn't go out with it to the shuk, it would be still chayav. And says, according to the Ramah, you need both things. Yotze ba'arai, the shuk, and the katan covers most of his body. What are we talking about? What kind of beged is this? That is it possible to have a beged that the katan is going to fit him most of his body, and the gadol is going to go out with it sometimes to the shuk? I mean, what are we talking about? What are the pants of a katan? Talking about a hoodie? I mean, what are we talking about? He obviously gadol is not going to fit into. He's never going to go out to the shuk with a hoodie of a katan, or the pants of a katan, the overalls of a katan, or the romper of a katan. I mean, he's not going to go out with these things. It's not going to fit him. What are we talking about? So, I like to suggest over here, I've been hinting this all along, that what are we talking about? Talis. Talis, talis. The blanket. That's what we're talking about. What's something that a gadol and a katan are both going to use? A katan, it's a blanket that covers most of his body. That's how big a blanket is. It covers your head, it covers most of your body. You don't have to put it over your head, you can put it over your feet and most of your body. That's a blanket. That's what we're talking about. It's a big blanket. Sometimes a gadol will take the blanket, even if it's a katan's blanket, and when he wants to go to the door, to answer the door, not to go to the shuk, like Rashi said. He's not going to go out of the house with this. He's going to go to the door. He's not wearing clothes in the middle. I mean, he's wearing his boxers. That's all he's wearing. So he wants to go to the door. Someone knocks on the door. He'll take the cotton blanket. Cotton's not using it or whatever. And he'll go arai. Yotzeba arai. Yotzeba, go out of his bedroom, not go out the shuk. I don't think you can go out with a cotton, your child's blanket. You're not going to cover yourself. If you're not covered, you're not going out the shuk like that. No one would go out to the shuk like that. You look like a fool. That's what we're talking about, a blanket, and that's why it's included in Kriya Shema, this whole parsha of Kriya Shema, because you say it both b'shachris and arvis, b'shach b'chav kumecha, right? When do you say Kriya Shema? B'shach b'chav kumecha, right when you go to sleep, when you have a blanket with you, and also when you get up in the morning, when you just get out of your blanket, right? That's the time we're talking about Kriya Shema. We're just talking about right after you got out of bed in the morning, right after you get it. Before you go to sleep at night. B'shach b'chav kumecha, it's a talis. Skasa Rosh of Rubo. And to lend credence to this, there's a Gemara in Kedushin. If you ever learn Masechus Kedushin, the Gemara talks about selling your daughter, your 3-year-old daughter, till 12. She could sell her as a shifta, or you can sell her as a wife to somebody. You get the money for the father. The bottom of Yuchem and Al, the sign you have big dough ba. Kevan Shapira is top of Yuchem Abayas. Kevan Shapira is Talisa the Shuvin and Rasha the Mochra Diva Rebbe Akiva. This is talking about you can sell it for two things: one for a shifcha and one for a wife. And so once the Gemara says Pirish Talisa now, once you sold it for a wife, that you sold her as a wife, what is Pirish Talisa all that? Meaning it's very common for a man and a woman to share a blanket together. When they're together, even just sleeping next to each other, they share a blanket. It's more cozy, it's more fun to share the blanket. That's when it says big dough ba, it's talking about big dough ba, beged. The common use of the word beged in the Torah is a blanket. That's what it means. And it calls Pirish Talisa all that, but big dough Talisa. Yeah, it's the Lashon of the Gemara. Talish Hakotam Eskasa Barosh Rubo. Talking about blanket. Right? The things people wear nowadays under their garments, or they wear during davening, I really think, I mean, obviously they're a remembrance of what the real message of Siddis is, but there's no point in wearing it at these times. I mean, during the day you're not going to sleep, and when you're davening, you're certainly not going to sleep. I believe both psukim that talk about tzitzis, right? One in Midbar, in the end of Parsha Shlach, and one in Parsha Kiseitze, talk about garments that you use when you go to sleep. I believe that the pasuk when taking Kriya Shema says kanfei bigdehem. You should make a blanket. You should make a blanket. You should put tzitzis, put tassels. You know, when you have those tablecloths, you have the tassels hanging down. A nice blanket, a nice comfortable blanket. You've seen blankets like this. They have tassels along the fringes. They're fringes of the thing. It makes it look nice. Then also, when it says in Dvarim, it talks about ksuscha, kedilim tasal ksuscha. You could say it's also referring to a blanket, or you could say ksus is a covering, right? It says by who was it? Melech Avimelech, Melech Gerar, and he went down Sarah to Tehillah chsus einayim. It should be a chsus einayim. It should be a chsus because he saw her naked. He saw Sarah naked. So be a ksus. It should be a covering for ksus is something that covers the naked part of your body. I mean your underwear. Gdilim Tasalach Abba Kanfos Ksuska is talking about how you should make your underwear. You should make them with semer pishtim, with wool and linen, so they should be strong and supple at the same time. Based on a thong, maybe a male thong, or a woman also a thong. She's also chayiv and tzitzis. When you go to sleep, it's talking about things when you go to sleep. That's the whole mitzvah of tzitzis, is when you go to sleep. Maybe knapsil tchelas. Tchelas is also what you wear around as a waistband around the thong, whatever you want to say that. It should be tchelas. So that's basically, these two psukim are talking about both a blanket and maybe underwear, and that's what these psukim are talking about. And that's why it makes sense that Talisha Akadim Eskasa Rosh Rubo, it's talking about something that a gadol could use. He's not going to use a hoodie of a katan, but he'll use a blanket of a katan. It's not as big, it's not going to fit around him. But he'll go to the door, someone knocks on the door in the middle of the night, he wants to go answer the door, he'll take the small blanket on his couch or whatever that the katan is not using. Katan has a different blanket, and he'll cover his himself, he'll cover his thong or his boxers, whatever he's wearing, and he'll do it all right. He's not going to do it bekeva. He's not going to wear that normally to the door. If there's nothing else, then he'll wear it. If he has a night robe, he'll put on the night robe. But so that's all the Gemara is saying. That's why it's something that can be used by both of them. It's a blanket, as we're talking about. So once we know that's the case, so it's very interesting, and it seems that the mitzvah really only applies in these cases. Because when else do you wear a four-corner garment? Blankets have four corners. Maybe a thong has four corners, but what other begadim wear four corners? I think we're missing the point with tzitzis nowadays. There's a right. I mean, common practice is that, I don't know. I was taught this in custom classes that, when you're together with your wife, the man's supposed to cover himself with a sheet or something like that. Which reminds people, or it's reminiscent of wearing a tallis. In the morning when you wear a tallis, married men wear a tallis. They wear a tallis. They cover their head. And I think the halacha there says in Reish Mem 240 Orach Chaim, we'll get to that one day, talks about halachas in the bedroom when you're together with your wife. It says you should cover yourself, I believe, a tallis, and that's common practice. First, you sleep with your wife in the same blanket, and you're supposed to when you're together. I'm not sure the source that you have to cover yourself when you're together with your wife, but that's interesting that a man starts to put on a tallis once he gets married in the Ashkenazi custom, because to remind him of that. I mean, I think I thought about this, like the relevance. Why am I putting on a tallis now? The relevance, makes sense that I'm putting on when I get married, because something I do now when I get married, when a man is together with his wife, he puts it over him, the cloth. That's the common practice. I don't know if that's halacha or chiyuv, but anyway, so that's what tallis and tzitzis are all about. They're all about going to sleep at night and what you wear when you go to bed. So it's very interesting that this comes up, but this seems to be practically what we're talking about. There's a lot of proof from the Gemaras. Hope you enjoyed today's share. See you tomorrow.